Next on our list of ways to navigate employer benefits and pension options, we're going to talk about the health savings account. Now, if I mention this account, you may say, all right, yeah, I've heard of a health savings account. So let me take a step back and talk about the benefits first. Would you like to have money that you can spend on your healthcare expenses that will not be taxed? I think we would probably say yes. Would you be interested in having an investment vehicle that you can put money inside of, and that money will be tax deductible for you in the present time? And I think most people would say yes. Hey, it sounds like I can pay less taxes today. Would you be interested in being able to grow that money that you put in pre tax on a tax free basis? So that means the money that you put in. So let's say you put $4,000 in this year, then the money grew to $6,000. That $2,000 growth would not be taxed either. Would you be interested in tax free growth? Most people would again say, yes, that sounds like a great option for me. And if you said yes to all three of these, then that means you would be interested in investing in a health savings account for your retirement. Now, health savings account, the reason we call it a triple tax benefit is it is the only way, that at least the only way that I can readily think of, that you can put your money in pre tax, which means you get to write it off as a tax deduction today. The money grows tax free. And then when you access the money, as long as it's on a qualified healthcare expense, you get to spend the money tax free as well, which is phenomenal. So when it comes to you and your retirement, there's normally three things that you're worried about. Number one is whether I'm going to run out of money. Number two is how can I optimize and have quality health care? And number three is what am I going to do with my time to make sure I have lifelong happiness in retirement? The health savings account gives you the ability to check off two of those boxes. Now, granted, you can only put in $4,500 a year currently in the health savings account. You also can only have a health savings account if you have a high deductible healthcare plan through your employer. And number three is you may have healthcare expenses that requires you to access your health savings account before you retire. But it is a very nice tax efficient way for you to be able to pay your healthcare expenses in retirement and probably leading up to retirement as well, which ultimately means you have less money going out in taxes, which means you have more money staying in your account, which you can then use on other retirement expenses. So that's why it also helps us to have that comfort of saying, okay, am I going to run out of money? Well, I have my money optimized in a very efficient manner. Now, for those that either don't have access to a health savings account where it's not offered by your employer, or based on your certain family circumstances right now, it may not make sense for you to go to a high deductible plan. There are other benefits that we can optimize as we get ready for retirement, which could be a flexible spending account, which you may have heard referenced as an FSA account. When it comes to a flexible spending account, I've seen where people get those confused, the HSA and the FSA. They are not the same. One key difference between your FSA and your HSA is your FSA does not roll over, which is a very fancy way of saying whatever money you have put into your FSA, you have to spend that amount on that calendar year or that money is gone. And that is not something that most of us are interested in. Now, I have seen where some employers they allow you to roll over a tiny portion, but that amount is only able to roll over for the first 3 months of the year, the first 6 months of the next year, but then it goes away. So you have to be mindful of how much you put into a flexible spending account because if you don't spend it on qualified healthcare expenses, that money is going to go away. Another difference in your FSA versus your HSA is how much you can contribute. Your FSA, you can contribute up to $3,200 a year. That's where it's currently set at. While the HSA, you're able to contribute up to $4,500 a year. While the FSA does give us some tax favorable opportunities to fund our healthcare expenses in the current year, because we can't roll it over and save it for our retirement, that is not going to be something that we should be using as a strategy. If you have the ability to use both of them, I would use my FSA for my current healthcare expenses, and then I would use my HSA as a way to store my money for retirement, where that would be my future healthcare expenses. Or maybe if I have a healthcare expense that's higher than my 3,200 that my FSA allows me, I can then go into my HSA to cover the rest of it, which then lets me still optimize the rest of my money in a way that I can invest it towards my retirement. Because if my money is invested, then my money is working for me, and if my money is working for me, then that's the less amount of work that I have to do to earn the money. So either way, you're still optimizing your overall retirement in a way that allows you to have your money free so you can use your money to grow and make more money so that you have that retirement lifestyle that you're looking for. Another benefit is going to be your life insurance and your disability. I hear a lot of people talk about life insurance. We have a general understanding that life insurance is important, is the only way that I can make sure that if I pass early, that my family is okay. Because life insurance is often positioned as my number one asset when I'm younger is my ability to earn money in the future. We'll say I'm in the future and I've already earned most of my money. There's not a whole lot of money left for me to earn before I retire, which is a fair statement. But the way you would decide whether you need life insurance is you really need to look at the expenses and decide whether or not whoever is dependent on your income is able to maintain their exact same lifestyle when you're gone. And if the answer is yes, then you're right. You don't need life insurance. But if the answer is no, for example, they would have to sell the house because the mortgage can only be paid with two incomes, then I would say you need life insurance. Another strategy that we can use is we can look at our debt and then we can have the amount of insurance that matches our debt. If we have credit card debt, a mortgage, or even auto payments, we may say, okay, let's add up all these expenses, and then that's how much life insurance I have. So that way, my spouse, if I pass, just can pay off all the debt and they have to worry about nothing. They just simply have everything debt free, and then they can continue working if they want, but they also have the ability to stop working, or maybe they could find an easier job. There's so many ways to design insurance. I can tell you that I have seen firsthand, and that's often why I tell people I think it makes sense to get life insurance, even if it's a small amount, because you might be surprised at how the death of a loved one can impact us, where we think we're just going to go back to work the next week, but we may not. We may say, well, I have some PTO, so I'll take a week off. And then once I get everything situated, I'll go back to work. You may not. You don't know how someone's death will impact you. You don't know whether you'll want to go to the same job. You don't know whether someone at your job is going to say something dumb and you just never want to see them again. You don't know how long you'll be out of it, but it is nice to be able to say, I don't have to go back to work if I don't want to. Now, granted, it is unique for each of our situations. So if you're someone who says, well, we have already $1 million in our investment accounts, I think we're okay, then I'll say, hey, then you're okay. You're okay. You don't have to worry about it. We're talking about disability. Disability insurance is this idea that I cannot work and make the money that I'm currently making. And there's a couple ways to get disability insurance. One of them is I don't have the ability to do my specific job. And if I can't do my specific job, then I count as disabled. The other one is if I don't have the ability to really do like any job. And naturally, you can see which one will be easier and harder to qualify for. If I can't do any job, that means I'm like really disabled. I have probably had a severe accident or a serious mental health issue, and then I can't do any job. That qualifies me for my disability, and they'll pay 175, 60% of my income, depending on how long I'm disabled and how it's designed. When it comes to your specific job to be counted as disabled, that bar is a lot lower. If I'm a pianist and my fingers were broken, then I can't do my job anymore, so I'm counted as disabled. But maybe you can't play the piano, but you can still use your fingers to do a variety of other jobs. So you wouldn't be counted disabled if you had the version of disability that required you to be unable to do any reasonable job. And so naturally, when it comes to being able to pay for this disability insurance, if I am considered disabled if I can't do my specific job, well, that's more expensive because the bar is much lower. If I have disability insurance that's designed to whether I can't do any reasonable job for someone with my age and my experience and my education, well, that bar is a lot higher because there's a variety of jobs that we can probably do. Even if we were a professional athlete and broke our leg, we could have a desk job where we don't need to be on our legs. And so you can sort of see why that one would be a lot cheaper because it's a lot harder to be considered disabled. That would naturally depend on your own unique circumstances and situation, how much money you have, how much you would make. Because I had a client who was literally a rocket scientist and they had a stroke and it ended up impacting their functioning abilities and they could no longer perform the work that they had, but they did not have disability insurance. So most of the time we're like, okay, I have life insurance, I have my retirement funds, but what if you had a stroke that required you to retire 5 years earlier than you planned? Were those last 5 years, and we'll talk about that in the next section, yeah, put all these pieces in place that you knew if you checked off all these boxes that you would have had the perfect retirement. You knew that you were going to have all your debt paid off, your mortgage paid off, everything was going to be set up perfectly. And we had the stroke 5 years early. So we couldn't do our work, but we didn't have disability insurance. So we weren't receiving any money. The work that we could do after the stroke would have paid us a third of what we used to make. And so now our retirement plan is up in the air. I often tell people just check with your employer. It's normally relatively cheap. We're normally just talking about a few bucks a month, a few bucks from each paycheck. So just see if your employer offers some sort of disability insurance. And if they don't, it may make sense for you to reach out to a private insurance company. It's important to note that disability insurance is just for someone who's working, right? It means that I'm disabled and I don't make my income. I'm insuring the income if something happens to me where I can't do any work. You can't get disability insurance if you're not employed. Disability insurance is not designed that way. It's designed to replace your income if something happens to you that isn't death. Where we have life insurance for death, we have disability insurance if I'm disabled and unable to work, but I run out of my paid days off and I have to find a way to be able to fund the rest of my lifestyle until I can get back to work, assuming that I can go back to work at some point in time. Another benefit worth considering is long-term care insurance. As I mentioned before, these insurance options are designed for us to have peace of mind so that we have that comfort of knowing that I'm able to put all of my money towards investments. If I don't have long-term care insurance, if I don't have disability insurance, if I don't have my HSA and my FSA, that means that I would need to put a certain amount of my money into each of these buckets to ensure that if any of these events happen, that I'm covered and protected. Because if we don't want insurance, then that's normally the way that we have to do it. Now, granted, you could take the third approach, which is I'm healthy, everything's going to be okay. This plan is going to work perfectly. Because I did that. I did that when I first quit my corporate jobs. I left corporate America and I said, well, I'm not going to have health insurance. I'm not going to worry about life insurance. I'm not going to worry about any of these things. I've always been healthy. It's going to be fine. It's not really a risk if you know you're healthy. But then that freak accident year, two things happened to me that have never happened to me since. One is I went with my father-in-law to Nigeria for a wedding and I got bit by a bunch of mosquitoes and at least one of them had malaria. And so now I'm sitting in the hospital for a week trying to figure out how am I going to pay for this hospital bill. The second is I volunteered at Florida Bible Camp and I was a camp counselor and I was out playing volleyball with the kids. And my patella tendon, which holds your kneecap in place, popped off. And so now I need knee surgery. Both of these events happened to me the one year I didn't have health insurance. And ironically, since then, I've been paying for health insurance and I have not had any issues. I have not had any surgeries. I haven't had any problems. But it doesn't change the fact that even though I'm a very healthy person, that things happen. And when things happen, you want to be prepared for them. So when it comes to long-term care, this one is slightly different. This is more of a 7 out of 10 people 65 and older have at least one long-term care episode. And the average cost for long-term care in the United States is about $30,000 to $40,000 a year. And the average length of long-term care services that people need is about 3 years. Now, it doesn't mean it's 3 years straight through. It could be on and off. But it does mean if we have a long-term care episode that we have the money set aside to be able to pay for the health care that we need so that we can maintain a high quality of life. Now, when it comes to long-term care, it normally means that you can't do 3 of the 6 functions. These are normally just everyday functions like walking, going to the bathroom, bathing, feeding yourself, things like that. If you can't do 3 of them, then you're normally considered in a long-term care episode, and then your long-term care insurance would kick in. Now, for most people, it normally makes sense to look at these options around 50 years old because you'll probably pay, I don't know, like $100 a month, something like that, depending on your overall health and any issues that you have. It's a very unique plan designed for you and your healthcare needs. And then there's riders that you can add on where you can have cost of living adjustments, or you can have access to the money even if you don't have a long-term care episode. There are certain ways you can design it that increases and decreases the cost of it. But we'll talk about that a lot more in upcoming videos where we talk about ways to optimize your healthcare and retirement. But if you just are looking at long-term care, you would say, all right, I'm going to pay about $100, $200 a month, and then I'm going to have $100, $150, $200,000 of long-term care insurance available. And as long as I'm within that range where we said is 3 years, about $30,000 to $40,000 a year, then I know that I have the amount covered. You may say, well, Dre, I have all the money that I need and my money is only growing. I'm okay having a certain amount of my money allocated towards those expenses if and when they happen. And that's fine as well. For most people, it comes down to deciding how I want my money allocated in my retirement. Do I want a large portion of my money set aside kind of in a safe fund because that money is for long-term care, but I don't know when I'll need it, so I necessarily can't be invested aggressively in the stock market or in a business or real estate because that money has to be kind of liquid. If having a certain amount of your money liquid increases the likelihood of you running out of money in retirement, then it might make sense for us to be able to say, all right, let's get long-term care insurance so that way your money is still actively invested because you have only to put aside a certain amount each month. And you may be able to say, well, how about I have half of my long-term care covered with insurance and have half of it funded by me? There are so many ways that you can do it, but it really depends on your unique retirement circumstances and your overall goals and health and your situation. But it is important to make that decision kind of early because insurance companies know the numbers like I do and like you do. If 70% of people 65 and older have at least one long-term care episode, most insurance companies are either going to stop approving long-term care insurance when we're in our 60s, or the premium is going to be significantly higher because they know the risk that they're taking on is much higher, that it's a very high probability that you're going to need long-term care insurance in the near future. So they're going to charge a much higher premium so that way they can cover that expense. But you'll find it more common that they actually just decline us as we get a little bit older. So it's normally something that you want to look at in your 50s to about 60. And then after that, the decision may have been made for us where we would be declined for long-term care insurance. So we have to use another strategy where we put the money aside in certain accounts for if and when that event happens. If you're someone who's 5 years from retirement and you want to be more happy and less worried about it, go to obsidianwisdom.com/wealthy to learn more. I'm always thankful for our time together. I appreciate you. I really do. You could have been anywhere. You chose to be here with me, and I'm thankful for it. If you have any questions for me, go ahead and put them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. If you found value in this video, I ask you to like and subscribe so you continue receiving valuable insights on how to build your own wealthy retirement system. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.